Kade walked through the dense fog that clung to the forgotten graveyard like an unyielding shroud. Every step was a struggle, as if the very ground sought to pull him down into its depths. The air was thick with the scent of decay and the faint whisper of long-forgotten souls. He had heard tales of the graveyard's curse, that with each death it grew larger, swallowing more land and encasing more souls in its chilling embrace. But Kade had no choice. He was searching for something, or perhaps someone lost to the graves. At Kade's side, Celeste, a young woman with a fierce glint in her eyes, gripped a rusted lantern. Its light cut feebly through the mist, casting shadows that seemed to dance and shift in the corners of their vision. Celeste had lost her brother to the graveyard some years ago and had vowed to uncover the truth about his disappearance. Her resolve was unwavering, though her hands trembled slightly as they ventured deeper. It was as if the very air weighed down on them, pressing their hearts with an ancient sorrow. Aldric, a man scarred by battles both seen and unseen, moved silently alongside them. He was a guardian of sorts, a protector of ancient knowledge, and he had been drawn to the graveyard by a prophecy he'd read in an old tome. It spoke of a queen who ruled over death itself, and of a curse that could only be broken by confronting her. Aldric's eyes scanned the graves, searching for signs that only he could understand. The lines etched on his face were deep, and in the shadows he seemed almost as spectral as the spirits that lingered around them. As they continued, the graveyard seemed to stretch endlessly before them, the rows of tombstones multiplying with every step. They had expected to find a small plot of land, yet it was as if the cemetery had no boundaries, each death feeding it, giving it life. A chill ran down Kade's spine as he spotted an ancient monument covered in moss, its inscriptions faded with time. There, he felt the weight of the place's dark history pressing upon him, as if the spirits were warning him to turn back. But retreat was not an option. In the distance, a low, mournful wail echoed through the mist. Kade knew they had drawn close to the heart of the graveyard where the Banshee Queen was said to reside. The sound grew louder, reverberating off the stones, filling them with a fear they could not shake. As the wail intensified, they steeled themselves, knowing that whatever awaited them beyond the mist was something no living soul should ever face. Yet they had come too far to turn back, and each of them carried a reason, a need to face the curse and the queen who ruled over the forgotten graves. As Kade, Celeste, and Aldric ventured deeper into the fog-laden forest, an eerie stillness settled around them. The air grew colder, and the mist seemed to thicken, obscuring their path. Celeste tightened her grip on the lantern, and its glow revealed shadows that moved as if alive, flickering across gnarled trees and ancient stones. A sense of foreboding hung heavily over them, and each step felt like a descent further into the unknown. Suddenly, a faint, sorrowful melody drifted through the air. It was hauntingly beautiful, but there was something unsettling about it. Aldric paused, his face etched with concern as he listened. He recognized it as a banshee's call, a sound that signaled the presence of the restless dead. The melody seemed to be leading them forward deeper into the fog. Despite their misgivings, they felt an inexplicable pull, as if the forest itself was urging them on. Celeste glanced back at Kade, her expression a mixture of fear and determination. She whispered about the stories her brother had told her, of a ghostly queen who lured souls to their doom with her mournful song. Kade nodded, his resolve unwavering, yet he could feel a chill down his spine as he realized they were no longer alone. Shadows flitted between the trees, and the once faint melody grew louder, filling the forest with an unnatural echo that seemed to come from all directions. The three pressed on, their footsteps quickening as they followed the melody. It led them to a clearing where the mist parted, revealing an ancient stone altar shrouded in vines. The altar was cracked and weathered, its surface etched with symbols they could not decipher. But Kade sensed something powerful and sinister emanating from it. Aldric approached cautiously, pulling a dusty scroll from his satchel, hoping to uncover the altar's secrets. As Aldric examined the scroll, Celeste noticed a movement near the altar, a spectral figure draped in tattered robes, her face hidden beneath a veil of shadow. It was the Banshee Queen, her eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. She raised a bony hand, and the melody transformed into a wail of despair that echoed through the forest, causing the ground to tremble. Kade and Celeste braced themselves, knowing they had come face to face with the source of the curse. And as the wail grew louder, they knew that whatever lay ahead would test the limits of their courage. The Banshee Queen's wail reverberated through the clearing, freezing Kade, Celeste, and Aldric in place. Her ghostly form floated toward them, her eyes burning with the light of ancient fury. Kade tightened his grip on his sword, but he knew that no ordinary weapon would harm such a creature. The Queen's voice filled the air, weaving a tale of betrayal and sorrow, as if daring them to understand the depth of her anguish. Aldric stepped forward, clutching the scroll tightly, his eyes never leaving the Queen. He began to chant in a language long forgotten, the words heavy with power and intent. The Queen paused, her gaze narrowing as she recognized the ancient incantation. For a moment, the mist around them stilled, and the forest seemed to hold its breath. Celeste moved closer to Kade, her face pale, yet her eyes held a fierce determination. The Queen shrieked, a sound so piercing that it shattered the silence and sent waves of cold through the air. Aldric continued his chant, his voice growing louder as he raised the scroll toward her. The Queen's form wavered, as if caught between worlds, but her grip on the graveyard's curse held firm. She raised her hands, summoning a gust of wind that nearly knocked them off their feet. Kade and Celeste braced themselves, knowing that the only way forward was through. Celeste took a step forward, holding the lantern high as its light pierced through the Queen's ghostly form. The Queen recoiled, her wail turning into a desperate cry, as if the light itself was a reminder of a life she could never return to. In that moment, Kade saw an opening and lunged forward, his sword blazing with the light of the lantern, as he aimed for the heart of the shadow. With a final echoing cry, the Queen dissipated into a swirling cloud of mist, leaving behind only silence. The air grew still, and for a brief moment, it seemed as though the curse had been lifted. But as Kade, Celeste, and Aldric looked around, they noticed the ground shifting, the graves expanding outward, as if the land itself was consuming more of the forest. The Queen's curse had not been broken. It had only grown stronger with her passing, and the graveyard now stretched even further, claiming all who had dared to confront her. Kade, Celeste, and Aldric stood in the now empty clearing, breathing heavily as they surveyed the transformed landscape. The graves that once lay confined to the forgotten edges of the forest now spread in all directions, consuming the trees and land around them. Aldric knelt by the scroll, his face etched with defeat. He realized that their attempt to confront the Queen had only fed the curse, binding the land even tighter to her restless spirit. Celeste looked around, fear etched on her face as she recognized the creeping darkness that now seemed to permeate the air. The graveyard had taken root in the forest, and they were at its heart. Aldric spoke in a hushed tone, explaining that the Queen's power was tied not to her presence, but to the very deaths that occurred on this land. Each loss fueled the graveyard, and each step they took had only deepened its hold on the living. They began to retrace their steps, hoping to find a way out before the expanding curse could claim them. But the path had changed, and the forest no longer felt familiar. Every tree looked the same, and every direction seemed to lead them deeper into the darkness. Kade held the lantern high, its light dimming as the mist thickened around them, obscuring their view. In the distance, they could still hear the faint echo of the Queen's wail, a reminder that her spirit lingered, entwined with the very earth they walked on. Aldric realized that they had become part of the graveyard's curse, bound to wander its paths until they too became part of the ever-growing graveyard. The weight of that knowledge pressed down on them, filling their hearts with dread. Despite the creeping despair, Kade urged them forward, refusing to surrender to the curse. He spoke of the lives they had touched and the sacrifices they had made. They would find a way out, even if it meant facing the Queen again. With renewed determination, they pressed on, hoping that their resolve would be enough to overcome the darkness that sought to claim them. As the first light of dawn broke through the mist, Kade, Celeste, and Aldric finally found themselves at the edge of the forest. The air was still heavy with the weight of their ordeal, but they felt a sense of relief as they stepped into the light. The graveyard's grip seemed to loosen, but they knew that the curse had not been broken. It had only been held at bay. They turned to see the graveyard stretching out behind them, now larger and more ominous than ever. The forest they had once known was gone, replaced by a sprawling field of tombstones and shadows. They understood that their confrontation with the Queen had only deepened the curse's hold on the land, and that each death would continue to expand the graveyard, claiming more of the world with every passing soul. Celeste vowed to return, determined to find a way to finally break the curse. She looked at Kade and Aldric, her resolve unshaken despite the horrors they had faced. They knew that their fight was far from over, and that the graveyard would always be waiting, its silent specters watching from the shadows. As they walked away, they could still feel the Queen's presence, a lingering chill that reminded them of the price they had paid. But they also knew that they had escaped for now, and that the graveyard had not claimed them entirely. They were bound together by their shared ordeal, their fates intertwined with the curse of the forgotten graves. And as they disappeared into the morning light, the graveyard remained, its shadows deepening as the spirits within waited patiently for the next soul to wander too close. The Queen's wail echoed faintly through the mist, a reminder that death was never truly the end, and that her graveyard would continue to grow, consuming all who dared to defy its dark embrace.